Are you ready to make a powerful statement while celebrating the history of Tulsa's historic Greenwood District? Introducing the official design launch by the Pediatric Speech Sister Network, the Black Wall Street Unisex T-shirt. Join us in honoring the resilience and strength of a community that overcame adversity. This exclusive design features the words Black Wall Street, Tulsa's historic Greenwood District, elegantly overarching a symbolic rose. Wear it proudly as a symbol of unity and remembrance. Available in unisex sizes and multiple colors, this comfortable and stylish t-shirt is the perfect addition to your wardrobe. But that's not all. Use the code BLACKWALLSTREET21 at checkout to receive an exclusive 15% off your purchase. That's right, get a discount on this meaningful and impactful design. And that's not all. We believe in giving back. That's why 10% of the proceeds from each purchase will go to the First Baptist Church in North Tulsa. By wearing this shirt, you're not only making a fashion statement, but also supporting a cause. Don't miss out on this limited edition design and the opportunity to contribute to the preservation of history. Head over to www.pediatricspeechsisterstore.myshopify.com today. Use code BLACKWALLSTREET21 for 15% off your order. Wear history, wear pride, make a statement, and make a difference with the Black Wall Street Unisex t-shirt from the Pediatric Speech Sister Network. Visit our website now and be a part of the movement. Remember, www.pediatricspeechsisterstore.myshopify.com. Get yours today. Bye, fam. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pediatric Speech Sister Live. I am your host, Melanie Y. Evans. I like to come on here and talk about speech pathology from a culturally responsive lens. I have here Dr. Anthony L. Marshall. He was my AP U.S. history teacher, and one thing he drilled in our head was talking about U.S. history from an African-American perspective. Yeah. So he will be talking a lot about that today. The reason why I have Dr. Marshall on here is because Dr. Marshall, many people now are learning more about the Tulsa Race Riot, Black Wall Street. But overall, as I know that you know, as an educator, and how long have you been an educator, by the way? How many years?
15 years.
15 years as an educator.
You ought to know, I was an attorney for 20 years before I retired and became a teacher. But I love history and love talking about it very much. You know, I want you to know, Melanie, that I am a victim of a stroke, but I do not hinder me. I do not hinder me. I talk slowly now, but that's all right. I talk about history every day.
We are so happy you are here. And thank you for mentioning that you're a stroke survivor. I heard you say victim earlier, but you are, Dr. Marshall, you are a survivor. People listening to this may not know Dr. Marshall, but he has the same fiery spirit as he had before the stroke. Nothing changed. Yes. Even when I saw him directly after the stroke, the spirit did not change. I do want to ask you, before we get into the nitty-gritty of our conversation, how was it for you going through speech therapy? Really just anything that you would like to tell us in the profession.
I would like to say Howard University speech therapy is dynamite. It is dynamite. They have taught me a lot. And Georgetown have helped me too with my speech therapy. But it's hard, but I will survive. I will survive.
And how long were you in speech therapy, getting up to this point where you are now?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about the strategies that your speech therapist used?
They let lots of strategies. Every semester, they have a team that come in and teach me and help me about my victim of a stroke. Georgetown has helped me with my head. They have helped me with my head, actually, with my head. and they really talk about my brain, and it helps.
Again, so happy that you are here, and we are very excited to learn from you. Many people do not know much about Black Wall Street, and many people do not know much about Juneteenth. Now it's popular in the media, but Dr. Marshall, I will tell you, you'll be so ashamed of us. But when I went to Washington, D.C. for undergrad, and I told people I was from Oklahoma, of course, their first response was, "There's Black people in Oklahoma." And then that's when I'm like, "Have you heard about Black Wall Street?" And they'd say, "No, what's that?" So that's when I had to educate them on the Tulsa Race Riot. But I think that you would probably be able to explain the Tulsa Race Riot better than I can, being a history buff and all.
Well, the massacre, I call it the massacre, is very significant. It began actually before 1921. And Wall Street came about as Black people had to survive. I know the Rice Massacre had to start before. There was a railroad track, and right at Archer, the railroad track, and Black folk were surviving. They were surviving very, very well. They had bus services that ended at Greenwood and Archer. They stopped. But everything north of Greenwood, they were surviving. We had banks, they had restaurants, they had movies, all of that. The Black people were surviving. And then we really got started was a man. He was Black. And he was elevator operator. He was an operator. And a white lady got on it. And they had a confrontation. Anyway, when they came up, the woman said that they had raped her. And that was not true. And that was where you started the race riot. But one thing they have to know is actually it was started Memorial Day. It started Memorial Day and went over. But me, after the race riot, had no place to stay. As a matter of fact, they were camped in a holding because all of the other grocery stores and all of that were burned. Grocery stores, restaurants, houses were burned. And they were kept in a holding cell.
So, Dr. Marshall, now what was the man's name? Can you remind us of his name?
No, I do not. There was a time when I could remember the name, but one thing about my memory, it comes and goes. Actually, it's been circulated that the man and the woman got out of and went to Chicago. That they were really friends. Why it is still prevalent in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They have a big thing of it. And they also, they have Juneteenth, but that's another story. But they hold Memorial Day for this one.
Okay, yes, because they're right back to back. So the man is Dick Rowland, and the woman's name was Sarah Page.
Yes.
And you're right. I did hear that they were actually friends or even possibly partners.
Yes, they see what I told you. They were friends, and they moved to Chicago. But one thing that I must say, although I don't live here anymore, I can still say the blacks are survivors. As
Yes.
a matter of fact, Viola Fletcher, she is a survivor. She is 100 and she is a beautiful woman.
She is.
In and out.
Yes. They've been fighting a lot for reparations.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, Demario Solomon Simmons.
Yes, we love him in the Tulsa community.
Yes, he is really fighting for reparations, and I think they're going to get it.
You mentioned Booker T. Could you tell us a little bit about how Booker T, what that even had to do with the Tulsa race riot?
Well, it was one of the remnants that did not burn. Mm. He was a one-room house. And in 1921, they did not burn that school. But they did not talk about it, though. They did not talk about it. Even in Tulsa, they did not talk about it. Mm-hmm. But now, they have talked about it now. We call it Booker T.
Yes, we are fellow Hornets. Name. That was a huge thing when they were trying to change it to Tulsa, Washington from
yes.
Booker T, because it has
no. They are not going to change that name.
And that's good. So was that official that they decided to keep it as Booker T. Washington rather than changing it to Tulsa, Washington, or
yes.
is it more of a social agreement?
They wanted to change it, but they decided not to.
Good, very good, because they were trying to push that in 2013 when I was in high school. They were trying to
yes,
push Tulsa, Washington.
Right.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, Booker T was a staple in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I went back to Tulsa, and I started as a substitute. But then, rest her soul, Mrs. Coleman, she was sick. And then I stayed on, and I'm happy I did. Well, at first of all, I started slowly. It wasn't long, though, that I had to speak up and began to speak about the history of Booker T. Mm-hmm. And I was integrated. They started with me in 1973. As I started, we integrated the school.
Wow, that is so cool. And I don't want this whole conversation to be so sad about the devastation of Tulsa Black Wall Street. I actually really appreciate your uplifting tone about it. Because, like you said, we survived. There's the organization in the same Greenwood Rising. So, it's not all about the devastation about it. But one thing I just wanted to mention is you talked about how the high school was not burned down. Booker T. Washington wasn't burned down, yes. Which is surprising to me because you would think that out of the hate of the Tulsa race riot, that they would come for the high school also.
But that was one thing that they did not, and really, in 1921, actually now I think they would have burned it down, but they did not mess with it. Mm-hmm. And it's changed. Booker T has changed somewhat. Mm-hmm. But it's gonna survive.
Yes.
Anyway, so as I was saying, we integrated Booker T.
Yes.
And then I came back and teach there. Mm-hmm. And I taught history, and also there was AP. But before there was an AP, I taught African. I mean, not African, but
African diaspora?
Yes.
Yes.
But they taught it as a class.
At Booker T?
Yes. They took it out. Yes. That was that you did not know.
No. I wonder why they took it out. And that might have been why you were so adamant about teaching history from an African American perspective. Absolutely.
And, I was not teaching African American history. I was teaching history.
I love that. Period. That's it. I love that.
I was teaching history. Everybody needs to know Black have built this nation.
Mm-hmm.
We have built it from the slavery time. We have built it, and it was imperative. And that's why Florida needs to understand. They can't wipe it away. They have got to understand. We are here, and we are going to stay here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the critical race theory, that's a whole other topic.
Whole nother story. But I am impassioned about history being taught right. And it is important that they understand history cannot be left out. They have got to understand Africans have built this nation. As a matter of fact, I know President Biden spoke today at Howard, and he understands about the history and how we, yes.
Can you tell us, well, I'm sorry for interrupting, keep going, just about how whatever he mentioned regarding Black history or anything.
Well, he just mentioned it to the people that they have got to understand we are here. And he spoke about paying the debt. And Howard, of course, HU, the capstone of everything.
Well, before we get into just some recommendations that you would give us, because I like how you said that history needs to be taught right. And we did kind of touch on critical race theory and the fact that people don't want to talk about Black history. We can kind of get into the politics of that, but we're not going to on the show. Okay. So before we get into that, Juneteenth is also coming up. Can you just kind of briefly give us a quick history on Juneteenth?
Well, it started because Texas had not emancipated the slaves. Everybody else did. And then they came back and said, we got to understand that you have been emancipated. And so they started June 10th. June, say it again for me.
Juneteenth.
Yes. The Black emancipation. And it started in Texas. And then now they spread it all around. But we are also in Oklahoma. We also started June 10th. Because we know July 4th, not worried about us. We celebrated, but our Juneteenth was...
That was our independence.
Yes.
Yes. I know plenty of people who decide to celebrate Juneteenth in lieu of
July 4th.
Right. Because, there's still a lot of arguments that we're not necessarily free. We're still not really independent in the society. And we were independent at the sign of the Constitution as Black people. So, yes. Well, Dr. Marshall, what would you recommend for people who are in K through 12? A lot of us are school-based speech pathologists, and many of us are actually really into social justice, and we want to implement more Black history into our speech therapy plans, and even special educators watching this. What advice could you give us for making it more accurate and relatable?
Well, first of all, as I say, you got to have history taught. Black history is relevant. You can always talk about Black folk. It is imperative that we decide that history, Black history, is history. Black history is history. There is no way around about it. You got to know it. You got to know it. That is what I would recommend, that Black history is history.
Thank you. I want to expand upon that to saying Black history is history, because we always teach history throughout our lesson plans, especially if you're in the middle school or in the high schools. a lot of times we're scared to touch on Black history if it's
But
not.
it should not be.
Mhm.
Talk about it, and talk about it in pride. In pride, even in the slavery times, there were Black folk who had businesses. So be proud of ourselves, and white folk and Asian folk also. They need to be proud. No, don't say it as if you're hiding it. Be proud of it. Be proud of it. Even in slavery, be proud of it. You know, white folk always render slavery as bad. Turn around. And you cannot start it in high school, middle school. You can start it from the little bitty tots. They have got to learn. Black folk and white folk, all of us need to know. We are here and we're going to stay here.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Marshall, for coming on the show. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to tell us?
No, I am glad, Melanie, that you have been a beacon of light to me. Oh, really, you have been. You know, I once said, especially after having a straight victim, sometimes I wonder if I have enough to say. But you have really taught me that I have a voice, and I'm glad that you did. So I'm glad that you have touched my heart.
Oh, Dr. Marshall, you're going to make me cry. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to hear my favorite history teacher ever talk about this important subject that touches our hearts. You have been watching the Pediatric Speech Sisters show, where we talk about speech pathology from a culturally responsive lens, and we will see you next week. Bye, family.